Do you ever feel like video games are too easy? That a lot of modern titles have placed too much emphasis on narrative and graphical fidelity? Do you ever feel like video games have just lost their edge these days? If so, please allow me to introduce you to Furi. The premise of Furi is simple, and your goal even simpler. You control the Stranger, a long-imprisoned being who, at the outset of the game, is unshackled by the Voice, a mysterious, loquacious man who dons a bizarre rabbit costume. The Stranger is mute, but his intentions are clear. He wants freedom. To achieve it, he must escape a floating prison composed of a series of islands, granting him access to the planet below. It's a straightforward task, but one that will provide plentiful resistance. Armed with a gun and sword and accompanied by the Voice, the Stranger sets off in search of liberation.
Believe me, what's waiting at the end of all this is so worth the trouble.
Each of the game's islands is guarded by just a single adversary. That's right, Furi doesn't contain any rank-and-file enemies waiting to be pummeled. Furi is essentially a boss rush, tasking you with eliminating 9 main guardians, all united in their ambition to return the Stranger to his cell. While each Guardian features their own unique skill set and fighting style, the basic mechanics of each fight are consistent.
Now you're mine.
Every battle begins as a top-down, twin-stick shooter. Your prison purgatory quickly morphs into a bullet hell as you're forced to balance evading enemy fire with dishing out shots of your own. Your projectiles slowly chip away at the Guardian's life bar located in the top right corner of the screen. Once it's fully depleted, it's time to get up close and personal. A melee attack on the stunned enemy refills its life bar and initiates a third-person duel, where gunfire gives way to close quarters combat. During these segments, bosses periodically unleash a set of attacks, afterwards opening themselves up to retaliation. By taking advantage of these windows of opportunity, you can again deplete the Guardian's life bar, which this time causes one of the blocks beneath the bar to disappear. Once all of these blocks are eliminated, you emerge victorious. That's the general structure of a fight on paper, but of course, achieving victory in practice is significantly more challenging. Each boss brings to bear a unique moveset that forces you to adjust your approach. For example, the Line, an old man who can influence time and space, protects himself with a series of panels that can only be destroyed with your bullets. Conversely, the Hand, a stoic, heavily armored knight, can block all of your projectiles with his shield, forcing you to utilize only your sword. Each boss feels entirely unique from the last in terms of their moveset, the environment in which you fight, and even their personality.
This is a big day for me. I've been waiting a long time for this moment.
Part of Furi's identity, however, is that each fight is lengthy, with every boss featuring multiple stages of pugilism. So just when you begin to grow accustomed to the Hand's defensive tactics, he throws his shield aside, suddenly becoming an extremely offensive-oriented enemy. This dynamism permeates every battle, with every Guardian apt to alter its strategy as they grow closer to death. The Edge, for example, an ore-wielding warrior who lives entirely to defeat you, eventually retreats from the initial battlefield, turning his fight into a 2D test of reflexes that requires nerves of steel. These battles are truly gauntlets. A successful fight can easily exceed 10 minutes, but expect to often spend far longer than that on each bout before you crack the code and achieve victory. One huge key to success in Furi is learning how to balance offense and evasion. Attacking is paramount, of course, as that's the only way to defeat your foes, but a defensive awareness is equally as important to ensure that you don't go down first. The Stranger can dodge with the press of a button, enabling avoidance of enemy fire and telegraphed melee attacks, and the dodge can also be charged to cover more ground. It's an important mechanic to master, but even more vital is the parry. Every single Guardian will occasionally emit a white light and sound effect before performing a melee attack. These tells indicate that this attack can be parried. A well-timed button press will not only block against damage, but also set the Guardian up to receive a counterattack. A perfectly timed parry will highlight the enemy in orange, opening them up to a cinematic pummeling that deals heavy damage. Beyond the offensive opportunity they afford, successful parries can also recover a small amount of your health. The Stranger's health bar can deplete very quickly, so any chance to claw back from the brink is absolutely cardinal. The parry mechanic is simple and understandable, but again, executing it effectively is much easier said than done. Typically, enemies will unleash a series of parryable attacks in quick succession. Missing just one of these will send the Stranger to the ground, forcing you to repeat the enemy's attack pattern. Each Guardian presents a different offensive rhythm, meaning that you'll likely feel outmatched when you begin a new battle, but with time, you'll start to find the tempo. I'm typically more inclined to dodge and evade in most games, but Furi makes learning how to effectively parry both fun and rewarding. Musical analogies are particularly appropriate for a game like Furi. It feels almost akin to learning how to play an instrument. Initially, the mechanics can feel like another language, constantly interrupted by mistakes and failures, but as you make progress, what once seemed Herculean becomes second nature. Everything feels choreographed, as if you and your nemesis are engaged in some kind of tumultuous dance. Shoot, dodge, shoot, parry, attack, so on and so forth. Settling into each boss's groove is a huge rush, and helps to motivate you through each fight when failure tempts you to quit.
I am fighting for something much greater than this. Can you imagine the strength that gives me?
And you will fail. Furi is an absolutely punishing experience, showing no mercy as it forces you to master its mechanics. Defeat means returning to the very beginning of your current fight, so not only does Furi require an extremely high level of skill, it demands enough patience to start back from scratch when you've made one too many mistakes. Some may view this as Furi's biggest flaw. How can you tell when a game's difficulty is too much, too punishing? That's a difficult question to answer, but one that I think boils down to a game's foundational functionality. How responsive are a game's controls? How reliable are its combat mechanics? Is the game fair? I suppose if defeat feels more like the fault of the game than it does the fault of your own, difficulty becomes far more challenging to tolerate, instead feeling like a cheap ploy to extend playtime or simple ineptitude of the developer. Frustration can often cloud our judgment on this matter. I can't even count the number of times I've cursed a game to oblivion despite loving the overall experience in hindsight. Furi has elicited myriad expletives from me in my quest for triumph, but in examining the overall experience, I'd argue vehemently that it always plays by its own rules. The controls here are always responsive, and while the Guardians do alter their attack patterns and consistently present new moves, there's no variation in how these different moves manifest. Once you've learned how to handle an enemy's melee onslaught, you'll be able to do it again and again. Simply put, practice will eventually make perfect. Of course, there will be isolated moments where you'll swear that you parried in time despite taking damage, and there are most definitely difficulty spikes, but at the end of the day, Furi is fair. In between each battle, the Stranger slowly walks to his next target, with our bunny-esque companion providing motivation and information alike, shedding light on the upcoming Guardian and why you need to take them down. It provides appreciated context to Furi's minimal, mysterious mythos, and affords a great opportunity to soak in the game's techno-infused soundtrack and futuristic pastel world. These strolls also introduce much-needed respites from the combat. Again, it's important to note that Furi offers no other gameplay types or side attractions. This is an experience that doubles down completely on one element and buffs it to a fine sheen.
There is no fate. We build our own destiny.
Ultimately, your propensity for punishment will be a huge determinant in your aptitude for Furi. It's true that so many modern games opt for a smoother, cinematic experience, less inclined to push your skills to their limits. So too do games include a plethora of accessibility options, Furi included by the way, that allow players to tailor an easier experience better suited to their needs. These shifts are a great thing and continue to make video games a more appealing prospect for the perceived layperson, but every once in a while it just feels right to play a game that harkens back to the days of yesteryear, where the only means of progression was to repeat a level again and again and again until perfection was achieved. Furi fully embodies this retro ideology, and while it may tempt you to throw your controller across the room, to master its trials represents the epitome of euphoria.
She was a cheater anyway.